Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Hello to all the Facebook group members. Today we have the honor and the privilege of having a book author as on the panel. Her name is Louise Dunaway. And I welcome Louise to our session today.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. It's an honor and a privilege. Did you want to say something about yourself, Louise? How did you come up to our group, and what was the book that you had written about?
Well, I have been following Eckhart for decades, at least 25 years or maybe even longer. I really don't know. But so what happened was about 7 years ago, my daughter started on first it started on prescription drugs, and then it went to meth, and then it went to heroin. And so during that time, I was in a lot of pain and I was suffering a lot because she also had 3 kids. And so I was worried about them, and I was just like so wrapped up in all of that. And I just remembered Eckhart and his book, and I just started pulling it out and rereading it and going through it. And I just started journaling, and eventually it just became a book. And I just started, and it's basically a lot of what I've learned from following him, and how I became involved with these groups that are on Facebook is because I've gone, because I've been following him and reading his books. Like I've did the 6-month class through the School of Awakening. And that was all in the midst of writing the book and going through everything. So just all of that was like perfect timing, and just everything just started coming back to what I had learned in the past. And it was just all there. I just needed to, tap into it again. And so things have really turned around. And I wrote this book, and it's based on my experience of having an adult child who's an addict, and raising the 3 grandkids, and how I found peace. And so it was published in April. And so I've just been, I am also like part of support groups for grandparents raising grandchildren. And then we also adopted the children. So I participate in adoption support groups, and also like children with trauma, because they have a lot of trauma. But I find that the most important thing is me being grounded and centered. And then it just expands to them. And they just, they love meditation. They love everything that I teach them. They're just like sponges. And so it's been a very wonderful experience.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you.
So in School of Awakening, Eckhart has this module called teacher called Suffering.
Yes.
I think it's module 3 or 4. And in there, he talks about that our suffering finally becomes our spiritual teacher. And look what grace it has brought you. It's got you the love of grandchildren and a book, another baby, the book.
And and it's funny because that's actually part of what I wrote in the book, is that I really had to hit my rock bottom before, I was able to to go through this transformation process. And so it's true, like, what Eckhart says is that when you just get to the point where you just cannot take suffering anymore, then you're ready to be, awakened.
Do we have any questions on the Facebook page yet?
There's nothing yet. We have 3 people that have just commented. Hello. Christina's here.
Hello, Christina.
Hi.
Sandra is here?
Mm-hmm.
It's good. She's feeling better now.
Yeah.
Good evening, Sandra.
She got in right away. And then I think there was one more.
Thank you, Eileen.
Lakshmi? She's
Lakshmi.
been before. Yeah.
Hi, Lakshmi. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
We have everybody from Central Time Zone to Pacific Time Zone to East Coast.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, how's your daughter doing now?
Well, I actually haven't spoke to her in 4 years. She, I mean, there's been a couple times she had called me at one point when she was in jail, and then another time. But within that 4 years, it's just been, a couple of times. And I know she's living on the streets, and I know that, and when she was in jail, I did, when she said, I'll be getting out soon. And I said, well, I can help you if you want me to look into treatment centers. I can do, whatever I can to help. And she said, I don't have a problem. And so I said, when you leave your baby, at the hospital, that's a problem. Because she basically gave birth to him and just left. And so the hospital called me because I was already in the system since I had the other 2 kids. And they said, I know, we know that you have, through Child Protective Services, you have the 2 other children your daughter gave birth, and we offered her treatment. And when we came back to the room, she was gone. So we were wondering, if you wanted to take the baby. And of course I said yes. And he was born 6 weeks early. He was drug induced. He had meth and heroin and 2 prescription drugs in him. He was 2 pounds, and like half of his body was like, I want to say like paralyzed. It was like numb from the just from all the drugs. So it's been a lot of work trying to do like physical therapy and OT and counseling, and so there's a lot involved because their brains are like different when you have trauma and your baby, you're in the womb and you have trauma, or you're little and have trauma. Your brains are wired differently. So there's been a lot of learning, like how to approach like speaking to them, or even discipline.
More power to you. Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Lakshmi says that she's sending healing energy to you, Louise. So,
thank you. I appreciate that.
She added also to the children.
Thank you very much.
That's very kind and sweet.
And I think, the children overall are doing okay. They do have some issues, but, like I said, they're sponges, and they take on to, like every night we do a meditation. And I don't know if you're familiar with tapping.
No.
It's kind of like
the EFT.
Yes.
Emotional freedom technique.
Yes.
It's called EFT. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I am. Who is very popular on Facebook. I did, from Louise L. Hay, I did get a connection into him, and I watched him a little bit.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but I've tried it.
Nick Ortner?
Yeah, Nick Ortner.
Yes.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, he has a app out called the Tapping Solution, and also a children's book, which that's how I got the kids involved. And so they go through the whole tapping thing, and they do the whole thing, and it really does like calm them down like completely. Even if I start to see them getting into like some kind of emotional like fit or something, I'll just start tapping. I don't say anything, I just start tapping, and then they start just automatically, and you can just see them just calming down. It's really like a great technique.
That's a great tip, Louise. So for all the viewers, Nick Ortner, maybe you can go back into where the Facebook uh, post is for the Facebook Live, and we can put a link to the EFT technique that he
Okay.
teaches, the
Yeah,
tapping technique,
definitely.
which is like meridians. They call meridians, and you tap on the meridians, right?
Right. It's very similar to like acupuncture. They use the same points, and except instead of needles, you use your fingers. And you're supposed to say like a little script with it, like, even though I'm feeling angry right now, I deeply love and accept myself. And you repeat the mantra or the saying over and over as you tap throughout. But like I said, sometimes when they're in that like real deep emotion, I'll just start tapping, and then they start, and before you know it, it's just calms them down, and then we're able to discuss things with them.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Louise. And I think that gives you an opportunity to be a new kind of mother. Maybe you were not that kind of a mother to your daughter, but now the mothering that you do to your children, which is grandchildren, are more presence oriented.
To
Like
some degree, because like I said, I've been following Eckhart and other, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Wayne Dyer, and, you mentioned Louise Hay. I've been always one, for many years. So my adult children, the 2 adult children were, brought up in a lot of ways that with that same, I was very involved in that stuff. So I really believe, and she was also a very good like student, like academically. Like I really never even had to ask her to do homework. She would just do it, and she always was an A student, like very athletic. She was like, on the volleyball team, on the soccer team, and the swim team. And so I don't know. I kind of feel that, and I had a lot more energy back then. So they almost got it a little bit better because I was able to run around and get on the slide and do this and that, But, what I've learned about addiction is there's also a lot of times there's a mental health piece to it. And so I don't know if there was some kind of mental health involved. I do know that she met somebody who's the father of the kids and immediately changed. And I just felt like from that moment, she was just lost and gone. And it was like within a week of knowing him. And so, I've done a lot of research on that too, like on like mind control and things like that. So I really don't know. I just know that, these kids now do have, because I'm a lot more present and aware. Even though I was doing that practice then, I never really was committed enough to go on. Like I would always kind of stop. And it was almost like a spiritual high. I would do it for a little bit and then kind of give it up. And it wasn't until I really hit my rock bottom that there was a big, huge shift in me.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to read a comment. Sandra says, it is wonderful. Tapping really does help. So we have other Facebook group members that have done the tapping.
Yeah, and Lakshmi shared a couple of resources on it as well. She put them in the comments.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yeah. There's also a school where I took some courses. It's called EFT Universe. And I think they're out of the UK, but they have several like courses, and even if you want to be like certified, and there's a lot of really great resources on his website as well. But it is, I share 3 tools in the book that I felt that really shifted me in a lot of areas, because when you're dealing with this too, there's a lot of emotion, because you're losing your child that you, like her and I were always very close. We'd always go eat sushi together. We'd always watch little TV programs together. We'd always pray together. We'd always meditate together. She was actually even a yoga teacher, so we do yoga together. we were very, very close. So there's that dealing with the emotions of losing your daughter that you once knew and loved. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that comes up with that. So I share these 3 tools, and one is journaling, because I feel like that's kind of how the book came to be. Because I went back and I started looking at my early journal entries, and I was like, wow, like I've really come a long way. And then it made me feel like, if I can help even just one person to get out of that misery, because, you know, we think these thoughts over and over again, like maybe if I would have done this differently, if I would have maybe loved them more, not loved them as much, not spoiled, you know, you can make yourself crazy going over the past, or, you know, going, you know, future wise, saying, oh my gosh, they're out on the streets, they could be getting COVID, this could happen, this. And so, you know, when I saw that I had made that shift, I'm like, wow, if I could help somebody to stop that thinking that just makes us insane and crazy, and to get present, then it would be worth writing a book and going through that. And I actually feel that it was just like something that just guided me, because, you know, often people will say, you know, how did you write a book when you have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old? And I honestly, like, don't even know. Like, it just came out. I would just sit, you know, I put them to bed, and I'd sit at the computer and type for a couple of hours, and all of a sudden it was a book. And then the other tool that I share is meditation. And then the third tool was tapping.
Thank you, Louise. Since there are no questions yet, Eileen, what I will bring up is I had an epiphany the past few weeks about a few incidents that happened at work. And this is something that I've been talking during group meditation about, is limiting beliefs, Louise.
Yes.
So if you hold the belief that my daughter is addicted, my daughter is addicted, my daughter is addicted, my daughter is addicted, and you repeat it like 10, 15 times a day, then the universe arises to meet its law of attraction. That is the conscious manifestation. Your daughter will never, ever leave her addiction. So the way you have to, the way you heal that is to see her beyond her addiction into her essence. Like maybe when she was little, when she was 4, how you could see her essence, right? So see her essence as that is formlessness, that's invisible, pure, positive, crystalline, luminous essence, right? So see her as that and say, she has infinite potential. This addiction is like we've learned in School of Awakening, right? Suffering will ultimately bring her to her awakening. So all she's doing is her soul is choosing the path to follow addiction to bring the suffering so that she can awaken. So you cannot change that path. Does that make sense?
Oh,
So
yeah, definitely.
the one thing I would say is pull back from any change that you want to initiate, because what you're saying in your action, I don't like who you are. You're not accepting the present moment. You're not accepting her that she is okay, even as an addict. That's her, what Byron Katie says, right? Right now, that is her job. Her job is to be an addict.
Right.
Right? And she's doing her job so well. Why would you take that away from her? Right? So let her be the addict. And what you be is unconditional love. From presence, be that unconditional love. There are a few comments. I'm going to read them. Christina says, blessings and peace for sharing, Louise. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
They want to know the name of your book.
It's called Grandparents Returning to Parenthood, and it's under a pen name, and the pen name is Tabitha Sage.
Thank you, Louise.
And it's available at Amazon, but you can also go to the website, and that's www.tabbysage.com. And on there, when you go to the website, there's a pop-up screen and you can sign up for the newsletter. And once a month, I just send out a newsletter with like resources and giveaways and just kind of like a fun community newsletter.
What you can do is at the end of this, in Messenger, send me the links and I'll go post it on the live session. And when I repost the recording, even then I'll go ahead and post your links. So people have your book link and as well as the information about the newsletter. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for sharing that. So the epiphany I had, since we don't, Lakshmi says visualization does wonders. So visualization is another technique as well. I know Eckhart in the Conscious Manifestation course said that, I think there's a free video as well, right, Eileen, where he talks about before the power of now, he actually visualized the whole, he drew a sun, he colored it, and then he put a book is being written. And
yeah,
then,
I think I saw that.
And then lots of people coming to spiritual teaching, traveling everywhere around the world. And then he put away the paper. He never even looked at it ever again after he did that in Glastonbury. And then he says years later, he opened the paper and everything came to pass, whatever was on the paper. Like, so it's incredibly amazing. So what I wanted to share was, I talk about limiting beliefs, and there's a book called The Nature of Personal Reality, which is a channel teaching by Seth, written by Jane Roberts. In the book, Seth says that all these thoughts are energy formations. So negative thoughts have their own electromagnetic frequency, right? So what I've noticed is, and I've had this incident happen at work. So we may think that we are thinking a thought. We may say, and somehow in this past year, I've become very intuitive about people's limiting beliefs. Like I can look at a person, I can look at their behavior, and then exactly know, you know what Eckhart says, when the shutters are closed, the light cannot shine through. So I can see the shutters come down for that person.
Wow.
So here's the thing. What I've noticed is we may say a thought, and thought is energy formation too. And that's why I'm saying, don't think the thought that she's an addict, right? Because we are manifesting it. So drop the thought. So I may look at my coworker and say that she is addicted to her mothering role. This is coworker B. I may go tell coworker A, and I think I have this very East Indian, you know, like Sadhguru talks, very presence, sword of presence, right? Very unaffected manner. I'll just state a statement, right? I think she's addicted to her mothering role. And I'll see that person, coworker A, go to coworker B, right? And then the coworker B has a pain body attack. So just imagine one thought energy formation because of the content of what it was, that it could be a judgment, right? That people could take it as a judgment, that I am saying it just out of my analysis of the person, right? And so I've become a little bit more, I hold back in during a lot of people say, why don't you respond to the Facebook post? It's like, you're not ready. You may not be ready for me to say what I'm saying, because I'm going to say something that is, if you don't have enough presence power, you will not be able to receive what I have to say, right? And you'll take it as a judgment. You'll take it as negative. And then that because of the Eckhart talks about thoughts being like bubbles, right? So what will happen is this human being will attach more bubbles to it and make it a little bit more inflated. And then it'll go to the third person and boom, there's an explosion, atomic bomb kind of explosion. And this person will come to me and say, why do I have to be the one that has to change? Right? Why should I change? And they'll have like a pain, like they'll start shouting and screaming kind of thing. So that's how negativity multiplies. So if we see violence out on this planet, if we see, just look, one small statement that was non-polarized from my intention was just a reading, right, of the energy pattern of that human being, goes to one, that person multiplies it, right, goes to the third person and their pain body bursts. And look at all the rioting and all the negativity. So have compassion for it. That's what's happening, is human beings are just replicating, multiplying the negativity out into the universe. And what we need to, and that's why it's so imperative that if you have 10 minutes of time, meditate. If you have 15 minutes of time, meditate. If you have 2 hours of time, meditate. The more stillness you bring, you heal this universe, because there are enough people putting in that violent energy out. And a lot of people seem to think that, so to the physical form, and this is another thing I learned from this book, The Nature of Personal Reality. A lot of people look at the physical form and say, hey, that's Eileen or that's Louise. But we are constantly interbreathing, like our skin, the chemicals out of our body are constantly going out and in. So even if we think that, oh, none of the violence is coming from me, yes, the moment we start with that energy, the violence is coming from us. We go judge all the people that are physically throwing rocks at glass doors or riding or speaking violently, but we are throwing rocks just sitting in one position. We are throwing rocks. We are not realizing how much violence we are introducing out in the universe. Eileen says, I have never been able to visualize my whole life. I learned the name of it, but I'm trying law of attraction with that lately. You want to talk about it a little bit, Eileen? No?
I've never had that. I just have never had that ability. I thought it was fake. When people talk about a mind's eye, I thought that was that was figurative. I didn't realize that that was actually something that people had.
Like visualization, like you couldn't imagine a future better you?
I can't do any
Visualization.
Never in my whole life.
That's your limiting belief.
I'm working on it. I didn't know it was a limiting belief because I didn't know that it existed until like 2 years ago.
That's good. At least you are learning law of attraction, right? The same thing. The thought will create. We are constantly creating our present moment by the way we are thinking and believing, the way Byron Katie says, right? It's all in our thinking and believing. And that's what creates the universe around us. So if you want a peaceful universe, bring peace into yourself, right? Sandra says, doing an image book with pictures and sayings written out. Each page deals with one life situation, really helps maintain my focus. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that tip. Yeah, pictures are a creative work too, right? So it can be a meditation in itself. During the conscious manifestation course, and I will look the exact affirmation up and post it on that Facebook live page. Eckhart gives this affirmation: my life is filled with creativeness, achievements, and prosperity. And then he says, take a pause and say, I'm filled with power. right? When we take that breath and we say, I'm filled with power, that power is the power of our presence. Um, so that's an affirmation that what you can do is very slowly write it. And I love writing with that HB 20-cent pencil, right? The yellow pencil. I love writing with, I don't know, I like the smell of the wood and the lead. And so
Yeah.
I don't like mechanical pencils. So I'll slowly write with that. My life is filled with, in cursive, creativeness, achievements, and prosperity. I'm filled with power. Then the other thing he says is a lot of people have this limiting belief about money. They'll say, uh, um, we have to take that feeling out of us that I don't have enough money, I'm never going to make enough money, or I'm not going to have enough finances. Then we're worrying about the future. So he says that's not a good vibrational energy to manifest abundance. So feel your presence, and in that presence say, abundance is freely flowing into my life, right?
Mhm.
So he says that as well in the conscious manifestation course. Donna's not here, so any more questions, Lakshmi and Sandra? No more questions?
There's nothing at the moment, but there's a delay, so they might say that in a second.
Ask questions. So the law of attraction, Eileen, for you started with, because we were talking about limiting beliefs, right? Like the thought creating.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about that, Louise, during group meditation, that, and I tell everyone that I'm coaching that be very, very careful if you're doing, and I use sacred acoustics as meditation. So once you start getting into the depth of presence, be very careful about what you're thinking, because even saying, oh, I'm not going to get those bananas, you'll manifest the not getting bananas,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
something as simple as that, that I have a story in one of the videos that Parker and I did. I have this a few months back. Um, it so happened that I was talking to my coworker, and she was telling me um, about this macaroon store that in I live in Plano. So she said in Plano there's this macaroon store, and then maybe a thought came into my mind that, hey, I've never eaten, I mean, it's been a long time since I've eaten macaroons. So I let it go. A couple of days later, my son goes and buys macaroons. He's gone for his uncle's birthday to downtown Dallas, and then he ended up at a store and buys macaroons. And I'd never told him. I had never told him about that conversation, that
Wow.
I wanted macaroons.
It works. I know. I've been having it happen a lot lately.
And you
It
do the
works.
sacred acoustics and calm meditation, right? So
Yes.
it's that presence. Once we know that presence has power, it's like we can actually start to make shifts. We can start to like, you know, simple things that I'll have a great dinner today, and sure enough, somebody will cook or send some good dinner, right? Or you'll end up going to a restaurant and having a good dinner. So it's simple things like that.
I've been doing it with health related things. So health issues that I've had for years, and just having the thoughts of being grateful, not having it, and they just disappear. I was able to eat something tonight that I haven't been able to eat in probably 20 years.
What is it? Ice cream?
I can't have dairy. I haven't been able to have dairy in 20 years, probably, or more. And my son got me like a little milkshake tonight, and I was like, you know, I can drink this. I will drink this. I'm not going to get sick. And I drank it. I was fine. Totally fine. But It's very powerful. There's
That's
one
what
question.
that's what he's teaching in his conscious manifestation course. I don't know if it's a repeat of the 2019 course, but I think he's redoing the conscious manifestation course because he thinks that
Yes.
a lot of people seem to think that Eckhart has never mentioned law of attraction or manifestation, but he has. It's just that, you know, what I feel is Eckhart is so astute in how the ego can come in from the back door and sneak in,
Yeah.
right? So he will not say, because he knows that once the ego gets hold of the conscious manifestation, they'll want to only use it for, they'll use presence power to manifest things and be done with it, right? I don't need presence anymore once they listen. So Lakshmi asks, can you talk about having free will? Do we have it, or is every thought predestined? So I'll speak to it, Louise, and then I'll give you a chance to speak about it.
Okay.
Do we have free will? Somebody asked Eckhart this on the website. Do we have free will? And as long as we are under our conditioned patterns, which is these limiting beliefs, we have no free will because we are governed by, we just repeat these past conditioned patterns, right? We follow our compulsions. Just like some families generationally have physical abuse in their families, or they may have some kind of addiction, alcohol addiction, or smoking addiction, or some form of addiction, the physical sex as an addiction, right? That becomes one method too. So as long as there is no presence, then there is no free will. So now Eckhart says, so presence arises. So is the personality of us choosing choosing at that point in time? If we were aligned with our, and I show this, right? This is our inner being. This inner being is connected to source, right? This is where, and this is us. So we are raising our vibrational frequency and we're saying we will be aligned with our inner being. Once we are aligned with our inner being, who is thinking? We are aligned with our inner being, source is thinking. So the free will is actually consciousness choosing for us. So consciousness is going to make the choice that I will do the kinder thing. I will go participate in this protest calmly, right? Or I will sit and meditate. Who is choosing? It's consciousness choosing. So free will is more like consciousness choosing to do right action. That's what I would call free. That's what Eckhart says is free will. I'm paraphrasing how he explained it, but that's how I would say is free will. Louise, if you want to say something about it, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, pretty much anytime somebody asks me a question about any problem, it always goes back to the same thing, and that's being present and having, being conscious of what you're doing and saying and reacting or non-reacting or, whatever. So I totally agree with that. I feel like, even any answer really to anything you have in life, if you just stay still and quiet the mind, then it comes to you. And that's how I've, found for myself for these especially the last 2 years. I feel like, like if you were to talk to the kids, they would say that I'm constantly going, I gotta meditate, and I'll just like sit down and just quiet my mind, like I won't think it out, and then I'm ready again. But it's like a lot of times I feel like I need that to keep me calm because they're fighting or there's a lot of chaos going on, or maybe because I do need to have an answer to something. or make a decision about something. And so I basically do that. I just let it come from within out.
Thank you, Louise. Shanti says, how do you stay all the time in presence power? I'll take a shot at it and then I'll hand it over to Louise. It's more about, I think over the years, as you practice inhabiting the body, so meditation is not just sitting in one spot quietly. It also is learning how to be anchored in your body, right? So if you can do some inner body work, like Kimming has a Chi Flow DVD. We've talked about it quite a few times,
Yeah,
right? It's a
that's
beautiful
great.
DVD.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you anchor yourself in your body, then throughout the day, like if you're writing an email, stop, anchor, then send, hit the send button. So the less, so we almost have to bring gaps in what we are doing. Like if you're doing an IM, when the other person is IMing, instead of going and looking somewhere else to do something else. So the way the mind energy works is it always wants to be occupied. So it wants to go look at another email. It wants to look at another document. If there's a conference call going on, they want to, the mind will go, oh, let me edit this email and send it away. And people called it multitasking. That is not multitasking. That is, you've taken presence out of the conference call and now you're putting it on. A human being cannot multitask. They're single tasking. They've just taken their attention out of the, so your consciousness is leaking. It almost is like instead of you fully being present for the conference call and absorbing the sounds, the way people are talking, their voices, true listening, instead of truly listening, now you're actually distracted. So your consciousness is splashing around. And guess what's going to happen when your conscious is so dispersed? Challenge comes. Because the universe will present you the moment consciousness, you're not being the window frame, you're not letting consciousness come through, you're putting a block with mind energy, a challenge comes. Somebody will get irritated with you. Somebody will say, Poonam, are you paying attention to this? So that's how, bring gaps and then extend your presence practice and stop the bombardment of information. How much time you spend on Facebook? Maybe 15 minutes. Couple of days, just do 10-15 minutes. And the next day, do an hour. But don't do 5 hours of Facebook. Don't do 5 hours of TV watching. All these are other person's information. Your being replaced by another person's information, even TV watching, unless you inhabit your body while you're TV watching. I'll let Louise explain, and I'll read the next.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
definitely think it takes practice. And so, I do a lot of little exercises to practice, but it's just about being aware, like setting your intention, I guess, to being aware, like that's kind of how I start my day. Is like my intention is to be aware, my intention is to be present. And a lot of times I'll be tapping that while I'm making coffee in the morning or tea, and and so it's just keeping yourself in that realm, I guess. And so, a lot of times if I'm, say, at the grocery store and I know I only have 10 minutes and the line is, I know I'm going to be late if I stay in the line. And before, my thing would be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And I just like, okay, this is the way it is, accept what it's happening now and just stay in the present. Just enjoy being here now. And it's like almost talking to myself a lot of times to bring that back, because it's very easily to get swept away. And especially when you have like 3 little ones, you know, just constantly with their little, all their stuff. That's a lot of energy around you, you know, it's like, ooh. So you have to, I constantly just have to keep bringing myself back and reminding myself, like, be present. Or like, say I'm with the kids and they're like, we're talking or playing or whatever, and I find my mind starting to go off to the next thing, like, oh, I should be, you know, writing so-and-so back, or I should check my phone or whatever. And I'm like, nope, you're here now. Enjoy now. Be here now. So those are what I usually do.
Thank you, Louise. Christina replied to Lakshmi saying the free hostelry is like saying being aware of the thoughts that appear. And if we identify with them and create a script or a story, we will be trapped there. But if we observe that they are just thoughts, they disappear.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and that's kind of something else too, like along with limiting beliefs, is a lot of times, like I'll say, oh, I don't really have time to do that, or, you know, I'll start, and I'm like, no, that's a story. You know, I'll tell myself, that's a story. You're creating a story. Like, what is really happening? You know, like just making myself see, because I feel like a lot of times we can go, you know, we can really create a lot of stories in our head. And so it's just realizing, I guess, that it's a story.
That's a beautiful pointer. That one of the things that I learned from Eckhart is actually his inadequacy. He sometimes talks about his weaknesses, which he calls his form identity. And he says people send him books, but he does not read all the material that is sent to him. So he has loads and loads of books all across his office. The same things, thousands of emails, and he does not respond. I'm sure even text message, when a text message, he said the first couple of times he would get distracted. I mean, I think what Kim and this goes back to Shanti's, how do you bring presence? Kim and Eckhart actually forcibly introduce space in their doing. So Eckhart will consciously not look at his text message. He advised in School of Awakening, all the push notifications, turn them off, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the messenger notifications, all the WhatsApp notifications, all the text message notifications, turn them off. You don't need to look at them. The moment the message arrives, you don't need to look and respond to it. And my son knows it, that he needs to call me on the phone, and I may not even answer the phone because I may be on a conference call at the time that he calls. But there is a
Told you guys
potential.
last week I do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all off. Because if I'm going to respond to something, I'm going to be in that present moment and seeing it when I'm in that moment.
Yeah, I think either it was the School of Awakening, or when we were in Denver, or when he was here in Denver, he talked about how, you know, like as a society, like we hear that beep on our phone and we feel like we need to just rush and look at it and respond. And that, when I heard him say that at one of the talks, it really helped me a lot too, because it reminds me, like, if I hear the beep on my phone, like, I don't have to run to it. I don't have to go and, you know, respond right away. And so that was a great tip.
Thank you, Louise. And I think, I mean, you have small children, so with children, you may not be able to. I have an adult child, so I don't need to actually be so fixated on my phone anymore.
Right.
So
They're
I mean,
small enough now where they're with you or they're with an adult. So I mean, I might turn text notifications off and if they're at a friend's house. But if somebody needs you, they're going to call you. We'll get you.
Yeah,
We'll find you.
that's how I feel.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Louise. Anything else?
Sandra just said they take charge of what is in their life in their time. I think she's talking about Kim and Eckhart.
And I heard Kim say that she writes a word for email. She walks away, comes back to the email, writes a few more words. So the consciousness that flows. One of the things that I feel being in this industrial revolution is we've lost this ability to hold things with sacredness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I remember when I was little, which is years ago, I would visit my grandmother, and it's a holy city in India called Varanasi. She lived in Varanasi. Um, that's where the Ganges flows. So I don't know what the maybe it is because they are in a holy city. Everything is done with so much sacredness. Like she wouldn't even let like one little grain of rice go down the drain. She would say, "Go catch it." Like if it's going through, she'd say, "Go catch it." Like you cannot when you eat, you only take so much that you can completely finish every grain of rice, every lentil, right? If you're eating rice and lentils. And then they would like wash, like you cooked in the morning, and after the lunch was over, the whole kitchen was washed. Like the sacredness of washing, cleansing the kitchen, right? Because guess what we are doing? We're cooking food for the family, and then we are feeding. So feed it with love and presence, right? So the washing kind of the sanctity is returned. Like you messed it with the lunch cooking, right? So you wash it, and then it's ready for the dinner cooking. I mean, it does feel like a lot of manual labor because all throughout the day in India, you're like working, washing, chores, mopping, sweeping. Something is going on. You're putting clothes on the clothesline, or you're doing dishes by hand. There's no dishwasher, especially in those days. There was no dishwasher.
That's
So
kind of my life right now, really. And I don't use a dishwasher, microwave, or anything like that. So that, and I'm constantly cleaning, picking up, washing dishes, clothes, making beds, putting it away. And that's like a great time to practice presence, actually, because, I love washing dishes because I just stay in that moment. Or when you're washing your hair, just focus just on what you're doing. Yeah.
that sacredness needs to return. But what I feel, even if I see of myself 10 years ago, I just wanted to be done with it. Like
Yeah.
if I was doing dishes, it was done with such speed. If I was doing cooking, and there the cooking is done with so much presence. Each vegetable is cut, everything is prepared, like washed properly, and then manually like cooked from scratch, right? There's no microwave dinners.
And I think that's one good thing actually about this COVID-19 is I feel like it's made everybody kind of stay home and have to cook and have to almost be forced into, being present at home.
Mm-hmm. We discussed this. I don't know. Did we do it during group meditation or last time's Facebook Live? I think
think
we
it
did
was
it.
our group meditation a couple weeks ago.
That we've slowed down. Sadhguru had said something about like the planes, even the planes flying, helicopters flying, they disturb the ether. So it's like COVID-19 actually raised the vibrational frequency of the planet, like slowed
Mm-hmm.
everybody down and said, slow down, give presence to the way you cook,
Mm-hmm.
the way you eat, right? Cook at home, cook with fresh ingredients, wash your
Right.
ingredients, look at your groceries.
Right.
Lakshmi, you don't have any more questions? Lakshmi and Sujata, her friend, didn't show up.
Lakshmi says, she just sent it, Louise, I'm visualizing you and your daughter co-creating another book.
That's awesome. Thank you. And you know, that's also something that's very hard because it is a label, you know, the word addict. But it's hard to speak about my experience without using that word. So it's kind of a lot of times you have to use certain words to describe what you're doing.
As long as you do it with the detachment, that it's a word used just to describe a life situation,
Right.
then
Right.
that should ensure that there was presence even when that word was said.
Yeah. But I
Right.
think, you know, a lot of times, like, I think people just already have that vision, you know, of what an addict is. And that's a lot of what I've learned actually through writing this book, or, you know, this is another lesson through writing, is that it switched my ideas about addiction. Like, I always thought that it wasn't a disease and that, you know, people chose that type of lifestyle, and that I had no idea mental health was even involved. And it, you know, I was angry a lot. Like, I was angry that my daughter chose to treat me and my husband with disrespect the way they did, to, you know, abandon her children, to, you know, let this other person control her mind. And I mean, it was a lot of anger until I shifted. And it's like you just become compassionate and you realize, and that's how even forgiveness came, is realizing that, you know, we only act out of the type of consciousness we have at the given time. And it's not personal. And it's, you know, and everyone has their own path, and there is a detachment to it in order to be at peace, because it's not my life, it's not my path. You know, I'm here to love and support her, but I can't control her life and, you know, make decisions for her because she's a grown adult. So there's a lot of, you know, layers that you unpeel. And, you know, also society, you know, tells us that when we have children that they're ours, you know, like they're our responsibility, they're our, until they're 18, but then they're their own person. And we still, a lot of times parents will still want to, you know, control their adult children, or, you know, want things for them so that their life is complete. You know, like a lot of women in my, or moms in my situation, like, you know, that's one of the things, is that they want their child to be clean so they can have their child back and they can have their family the way they want it to be. And they, you know, and so there's that detaching from that, what you want and what you think is best for you, to letting the universe work its, whatever it's going to work its way out through, and accepting that.
And you probably could be a role model, Louise, in because chapter 4 of A New Earth talks about mothering as a parenting as a role, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you detach yourself from trying to be a mother to a grown adult, and say now that person has to choose their own spiritual journey, which they are inviting suffering, right? We know what's going to happen if they are uh, into any kind of substance abuse, that they're
Mm-hmm.
going to invite some kind of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be their spiritual teacher until she finally decides. So you have to see her as making that decision instead of saying, no, she's going to remain an addict, she's making the wrong choices. So you're putting that limiting belief over and over on her, that she's not choosing the right thing, that somebody else is controlling. So look what you manifested. You did manifest somebody controlling her by saying the thought that somebody is controlling her. You
Yeah.
manifested it.
Well, I
So
mean, those were.
they rise in. There's a talk called "You Are the Sky."
Mhm.
What Eckhart says is, when we detect a flaw, like if we say this person is being controlled, that person rises to meet the expectation. Once we set an expectation, the other arises to meet the expectation. So the flaw magnifies. Look how much the flaw magnified for you, right? The more you set the expectation. And the other part that he talks about in chapter 4 is, a lot of parents derive their sense of self-esteem from how well their children are doing. The
Mhm.
moment the child is different, right? The moment the child is not a lawyer or a doctor, and especially for South Asian parents, right? Like South Asian parents, like if your child is, if your parents are Chinese or Chinese origin, or Indian origin, or Pakistani origin, right? The label is immediate that this child is going to be a mathematical wizard, an engineer, a doctor, or I don't know how this human being is just going to be, instead of allowing that soul to flower, right? So you have to allow her soul to flower, give her spaciousness. I don't know who you're going to be, but I know you have infinite potential, because every human has that seed within them, the seed of enlightenment, what Eckhart says. So you have the seed of enlightenment within you, and I trust one day you will be enlightened. And I'm going to go with that trust. I unconditionally love you. And my love is showing in the fact that I'm taking care of your kids. Now I'm going to pour that love onto my grandchildren, right? And
Right.
unconditionally love her. What society thinks, then you are, again, mental movie making. You're not seeing reality for what it is, that there is this
Right.
beautiful human being that needs to be unconditionally loved. You're not seeing that. You're trying to gear yourself, like, then you're playing a role as to what the society wants you to do as a mother. And then you get into role playing. You're not
I
really.
actually, I actually feel that I have totally detached from it. Like I honestly, when I think of her, I send her love, but I don't feel like I'm responsible for, like I feel like my prayer life has changed too. Like before I might say, like, dear God, please, help her to become clean, or please take these drugs. And now I've detached so much from it that I don't pray that anymore. I just pray that I'm sending you love, I'm sending you healing, and whatever is good for her will be good for me. That's just kind of how I see it. Like I feel like I can't get so wrapped up in her, because then it takes away from me and from the kids I'm raising now. So I have to detach, and I send her love, I send her healing, but it's not like something I'm constantly thinking about or worrying about or whatever. It's like I made that decision to let it go and to, send her off with love and healing, and what is will be whatever it is.
Best wishes with you. We'll talk about it next week too. So I'll welcome you back next week.
Okay.
Okay, we'll talk some more,
Yeah, that sounds
because
good.
it's a topic that we can talk a lot about. So,
Oh yeah.
and we've been able to answer questions in the middle. So
Yeah.
hopefully this was everybody spread some wisdom. Eileen, this was good. And thank you so much, Louise.